Talking to some of the best names in contemporary Christian music. This is the Hope FM Artist Interview.
And welcome to this week's episode of The Artist Interview, a place where really we get to travel the world to find some of the best names from contemporary Christian music. And that's very much our heart. We really want to highlight the people who are making waves in the music business. But also, we sometimes want to pause and also make space for some of the people who actually have amazing stories to tell and some great music. And also, perhaps people that are worth knowing. So I'm very pleased to welcome for the very first time to Hope FM, the wonderful Joe Hardy. And before we introduce him to you guys, let's hear a clip from his first song. This is Sing My Soul. And that was Sing My Soul by Joe Hardy. Hey Joe, how you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Thank you very much for making time to join us here on Hope FM. So it would be wonderful if we could talk a little bit about your journey with Jesus and your music and why that's significant for you, and what sort of things God has sort of planned for you, that at least your understanding of what God might be doing with you. But to just start off, tell me a little bit about how you became a Christian and a bit about your walk in that sort of area of life, your faith journey.
Of course. So I'm Joe, and I'm living in Yeovil in Somerset, and I say I'm living in Yeovil. I've always lived in Yeovil. I was raised here by my wonderful parents and wonderful family, and have grown up as part of Yeovil Community Church. So I'm very much a homegrown church kid. I was in the band at age 11 on the saxophone, and then the drums, and then started a band when I was about 13, and I was the front man with the bass. And I'm a little bit, I'm on the shorter side. So I was a short guy with a bass guitar, kind of front man sting thing going on, which was good fun. So church and faith has been part of my whole life. I've got incredible supportive parents who have always brought us along to church, and that's been a big part of our story. And so yeah, that's my journey. I guess the key points in that story are when I was I had like a make or break moment when I was trying to work out what I was going to do with my life, my future, and I was kind of set on architecture at a young age. My mum's an artist, and so we've grown up around art and creative things, and I was always focused on journeying towards architecture. And so I'd been told I needed to do A-levels in maths and physics and art. And I was discovered at college that I'm not actually very academic, and I didn't enjoy academics. So I spent most of my time in the art studio and picked up photography in the dark room, and got to the kind of through my college years was working out what I wanted to do, was picking universities. Actually, for architecture, realized you've got to get quite good grades. I had my mind sort of towards doing a gap year at our church. I wasn't that sure about it because they were always really cool, but I didn't really like the idea of becoming one of the team and working with my old youth leader. I really wasn't very sure. And I felt this like nudge from God in my college age that, yeah, I needed to go and do that. So I was like, okay, right, I'll do that for 1 year as a gap year before going off to university, but I'm clear I'm going to do architecture. I get to the end of my A-level year, and you could spell fudge with my results.
Okay, that's unfortunate. Although I say it's unfortunate, maybe God had a different plan than architecture then. That's what I'm guessing. Go on, what happened then?
That was the kind of key switch moment for me when I was set on university, and in that moment realised I suddenly couldn't go. So I dropped out of the gap year that I was supposed to be going on, and I re-enrolled to college to go and do an art foundation. I was convinced that's the route, that's the journey I'll go on to go and be there. And I was given this first project of 200 drawings. And I went away and I was sat on my parents' landing and I was starting these drawings. And I started to weep over these drawings and actually weep. My parents had no idea what to do with me. So they sent me down to the church to go and see the youth leader and was like, oh, we don't know what to do with him. Can you fix this? And so he turned to me and he said, I want you to go. And we had a prayer room up on the top floor. And he was like, I want you to go up to the prayer room and don't come down until you know what you're doing with the rest of your life.
Whoa, gosh, were you allowed to have like food and water up there for a few months or?
Yeah, I thought I was going to be out there for months. Yeah. And it was quite a few hours, but that for me, if in my like whole journey up until that point, faith was important. God was part of my life. I was baptized at a young age, but there was this like key switch moment where I really clearly heard God say, I wanted me to lay down my dreams and to serve him here. And so there was this like pinpoint moment for me of, am I going to put that stuff down? Am I going to lay down that? And I'm going to choose to be obedient and following here. And so I did, and I dropped out of college again.
So well, just to clarify, were you weeping over the pictures because it was so distressing doing the pictures? What was the reason that you wept at that point?
There was this realization that this wasn't what I was supposed to be doing.
I think if anyone said to me, draw 200 pictures, I'd pretty instantly realize that was not for me.
And now I look back on it, I think maybe that was it. It was just, there was a lot of homework.
Yeah. But okay. So you realized that wasn't for you. You dropped out of college and then you went to choose to do.
So then I joined this gap year at our church and that kind of has started this serial gap year journey that I've been on for the last, I think it's now something like 14 years of living the gap year dream. I don't think it's a gap year anymore when you're actually on staff and part of the team leading those interns. So actually what I've done is I've been on the journey of being an intern. I formed a band while I was on that team and we traveled around the country into Europe and even into Brazil, kind of playing songs that were like prophetic songs of hope and messages of God's love and transformation into schools and prisons and youth groups. And then actually ended up taking over the role of leading the team. And then in the last few years have been kind of transforming and changing more into overseeing all of our creative mission as a church. So yeah, that's been my whirlwind story up till this point.
It sounds like it's kept you fairly busy. I'd like to understand though, 14 years of serving in the church. During that time, touring, you mentioned, did you say Brazil?
Yeah.
That's an unusual destination. Well, why did you end up going to Brazil?
We've got a lot of links with Brazil as a church. And so we'd had missionaries come over and work with us for years. And it ended up being this exchange where we went over. And so, yeah, we got to go and play a whole load of dates in different places around Brazil. We learnt a bunch of songs in Portuguese and played the same songs everywhere we went, but it was fantastic and life-changing experience going there.
Well, I've got to say I'm a bit of a fan of gap years for people before they go to university and life-changing experiences, mission trips, things like that. I think they are superb. So that's interesting to hear that it was so useful for you, as well as hopefully a blessing for many other people. Just to flesh this out a bit, in Brazil, I know that on any mission trip, there's nearly always something that just doesn't go to plan at all, really. Maybe a silly story or something that you weren't expecting to happen. What was the standout moment on that sort of thing of your trip to Brazil? On
that trip, I mean, we missed some flights.
Never good.
Mainly due to getting our travel through São Paulo completely wrong and being stuck in gridlock traffic. That was that was bad. I think my memories more are just vast amounts of food everywhere we went because everybody was very excited to feed the meat hungry and excited young English lads who were excited by everything we did. My younger brother was the bass player in the band, and he made it his mission to just learn "You're beautiful" in Portuguese and announced it to every girl that he met on the basis that they might feed him. That was his. Well,
that is a nice line to try to get food. It would have probably been better if he'd learnt the words, "I'm really hungry. Do you have any food?" But "You're beautiful" probably.
It worked for him.
It probably makes them smile, I hope. So anyway, okay. So in fact, maybe that's a highlight as well. Because I was going to say, obviously the things can be difficult and challenging. But what was the standout moment where you went, "This is the reason that we've come"?
We were connecting with initially a group of whole kind of church planters across South America. So we were, it was this event called Tribal Generation was one of the main things we were going over to play. And there was like groups of churches from, inner city Rio, and their whole mission and ministry as a church was working with prostitutes and people who were stuck in that cycle within the city of Rio. And then there was this group of guys who their whole focus was working with heavy metal, people in the whole heavy metal scene. And so we met these guys who were like huge metalheads, and the way that they stood and did worship together was like screaming down the microphone, which was just fantastic. And there was these guys who their whole focus and mission was based around like hippies, and because Latin America and Brazil particularly is so vast, there's these huge communities in different ways. And so instead of like their whole mission thing was, instead of us trying to send someone in to convert the metalheads, it was like, actually we've had somebody become a Christian, let's let them go back into the natural environment. And then whole churches and people being transformed. And so I think for us, the kind of eye-opening moment, and this particularly was like the opening moment for me, was that God worked through people's giftings, through people's passions, through people's identities to reach those who, I might not be compatible with that group of people necessarily, but actually God works through me to meet the people who I am compatible with. And God was bringing, it was just amazing seeing things that we'd never ever dreamed of. Who dreams of a heavy metal church? That was just incredible. But yeah, it was like the takeaway moments for us were coming back and seeing actually our distinctives, the things that we were passionate about was creativity and creative arts. And so why weren't we just able to pursue that? And we started trying to, as a band, we were writing the most creative music we could. There was a lot of things in our performance and style that we did that was quite creative and inspired, because that was just what was within us. And we were trying not to just go with the flow. We treated every stage and every youth group as if we were playing Wembley. We would drive 6 hours to play sometimes to 6 girls and dedicate a song to each of them, but we would treat it as if it was the most important thing, because we'd seen like these groups of people treated every opportunity, every moment as if that like God was going to do something present and real right here, right now in that situation. But that was like the standout moment for us. It really inspired and set us free to pursue more of who we were, what God was putting within us, and allowed us to be ourselves in our mission.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You mentioned heavy metal church. There is a heavy metal church in Birmingham.
Amazing.
I have. I'm not going to say quite the pleasure of listening to some of their music, but if you like heavy metal, they're pretty good.
Oh, yeah, I'll have to check them out.
I'll try and ping you the web address or something like that, because you might love it. We've had Skillet. That's about as hard as we've got on Hope FM. We've had them on here before, so they were cool. I've got to say, I totally agree that these sorts of opportunities, hopefully you bless other people, but sometimes I feel that the biggest blessing is in yourself and the changes and just being stretched and actually seeing your giftings coming out and all that side of things. It's brilliant. So my wife and I have been on numbers of different mission teams, longer term and short term over the years. And it's been something that for us as well has been foundational in helping us just to grow. So if you're at home listening right now, and maybe you've got a child who's just about to maybe they've got A-levels next year or something, and you're thinking, I wonder what they're going to do. Maybe they should get a job in Tesco's as a gap year. I think me and Joe would both like to say, why not recommend to them that they go on a gap year with a Christian organisation? And there are many opportunities. You can search them up online that will help them to really find out a bit more about who they are and who Jesus made them to be. But Joe, 14 years, we've only covered a trip to Brazil so far. What else has gone on? What's gone on in your personal life as well?
I can bring you a bit faster up the journey there. So yeah, we've been, we were doing the band and focused on mission to schools and young people. And that felt like the dream forever. It was this rock band and we were going to be, the Christian Dave Grohl of, that was where we were heading. And then a couple of the boys decided to get married and life kind of shifted and moved on at that point. And I'd got married, but I was still convinced that we were rocking forever. Then there was sort of this transition journey where I started working for the church, heading up the gap year. I was overseeing our worship at the church, and worship was sitting parallel with all of this all the way through. So our mission as a band was very much like rock and roll. We were singing songs of hope. We were singing prophetically over people. We just weren't always singing Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. But then alongside that, we were leading worship. So, we'd sometimes, well, quite often actually, we'd get it wrong, and we'd be getting back at 5 a.m. looking at our watches and going, right, boys, see you in a few hours, because we were coming back in to do church. So yeah, the band had kind of naturally sort of started winding down. I was then focused on leading the internship and doing worship stuff alongside. And actually around that time, I'd started getting involved in New Wine and leading in a couple of the venues at New Wine and various other events. But I got to this point where I was like, I was really kind of torn, because I felt this creativity growing in me. And actually some of that had sparked back in Brazil was growing and growing. And I felt this burden for songwriting, and I felt this burden to kind of see new things brought to life. And I was still really excited about the internship and the role in the church, but they were kind of becoming more separate for me. And I remembered coming to the leadership of the church and going, look, I love this, it's been great, but I don't feel like this fits for me anymore. So I think it's time I call it a day. And they said to me, look, we're not invested in a program, we're invested in you. So evolve the program and make that part of it. So it was like, well, okay. It was just the most amazing releasing moment. So then actually over the last few years, I've evolved that to be more around creative arts and mission through creative arts to schools, to young people, and then to resource the wider church through that. But at the same time as that burden growing around creative arts and songwriting particularly, I'd started getting these prophetic words from friends up and down the country. And
now, for our non-Christian listeners, people who've tuned in by accident and they're listening to us chatting away, what do you mean when you say you got a prophetic word?
Things that were shared with me from friends, that they felt like these were God's words for me. They were things that he was prompting and nudging that were specifically for me and where I was at. So, and I'd actually in the end I had 5 separate words that were around songwriting, and one of them was about being a voice to the nation and the nations. And then my old youth leader, this isn't my boss, this is a previous person who had been a huge impact on my life, came to me and said, I feel like you're supposed to be writing songs and there's things that you've got to share. To which I went, yeah, that's really funny, because you're the 5th person who said that to me. To which she turned and went, well, why are you disobeying God?
Well, there's a challenge, yeah.
That was her feedback. So I then kind of was like, all right, I'm going to focus and knuckle down. And then I ended up writing 60 songs over this kind of year-long period. And they were songs that were, some that were for the church, some that were for my wife, some that were political Rage Against the Machine type rants, some that were really intimate songs that were never for anybody else to hear, some that were specific stories of other people who were in my life. And I kind of had all these songs in my hands, and I was like, I don't know what's the point of all of this. And there was this like moment in that year where I felt like God was trying to catch my attention, to go, actually, Joe, this is a new season now. And it was almost like a lay down all that stuff again. You know, the consistent message and the consistent story seems to be for me, when I'm getting my mind focused on what's next, God goes, lay that down and follow me this way. And so maybe that was with the band. I was focused on being Dave Grohl forever. And it was like, lay that down. Now, actually, I'm starting something new. And so, yeah, that had felt like a catalyst starting point for a new season of music and of ministry for me, which then led to releasing my first solo album in 2016.
And then also in 2019, you released an EP called Hold Me Still. And we're going to play one of the tracks from that in a moment. The track's called Sun. Could you tell us the backstory of Sun and how that track came about?
Yeah, of course. So I released the album in 2016, just at the end of 2016. Right after the album was released, we found out we were pregnant. And so that was kind of a total life shift after that. And probably not the best marketing campaign after you released an album, to then go and have a baby. So our whole world completely flipped upside down, as any people becoming parents know. And I think the journey that I then went on in my faith, my walk with God, was suddenly all about the father relationship and the father relationship between me and my son, but also my relationship with God and God looking over me as a father. And I've been really fortunate to have grown up with an incredible, supportive, encouraging, stable dad who is my hero. He's an accountant, so not at all rock and roll, but he's just an amazing, consistent, incredible, loving, generous man. And I've been so fortunate to grow with that. So my whole lens of viewing God has been through that. We had our son Joshua, and I started writing again a little while after that. It's inevitable that all of my writing then was shaped around becoming a father and what God's relationship with him was. So I was reading Zephaniah 3:17, which is the Lord takes delight in his children, rejoices over them with singing. And there was this moment for me that was like, wow, that's exactly how I see my son. I take delight in everything he does, in there's nothing he can do that will stop me from loving him. And I can't help but rejoice over him in song. And so this song sung for me is like my song over Joshua, but actually it also feels like God's song sung over me. And I hope for those who listen to it's an understanding of it's God's song sung over each one of us as well.
Son of mine, hear my cry. I take delight in who you are. Son of mine, hear my cry. I take delight in who you are.
And that was Son by Joe Hardy, and I'm very pleased to say that Joe is still with us for the artist interview here on Hope FM. Joe, thank you very much for that track, which talks about the Father's love for us, and you talked about how significant it was beforehand in the way you've understood more of God's love as you've loved your son Joshua. It would be great if at this moment you're happy to pray for our listeners.
Yeah, of course. Father, I thank you that you are a faithful, consistent, loving Father. Father, I thank you that you look on each and every one of us and you take delight in us just as we are. Father, I thank you that there's nothing we can ever do that will separate us from your love, that there's no distance we can run. I thank you that in all things, you are the God of detail. You're the God who intimately knows us. Even as we've been formed in our mother's wombs, you knew us there. And God, you know the number of hairs on our heads. And so God, today, for anyone who needs to hear that, for anyone who needs to hear that they are chosen, they are known, and they are loved, and that you look on them and take delight in just who they are, Father, I pray that they will know that love from you today. For each of us, each day, may we see that you take delight in just who we are. And for those of us who are our parents, may we learn to love like you love. And for those of us in our friendships, may we learn to love and give all of ourselves just as you do. We thank you that you are good. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Yes, he is, Joe. He is good. Thank you so much for your prayer. If you've been listening and you think, I've maybe thought for a long time I'm a Christian, but I'm not so sure whether I'm a Christian or not right now, just encourage you to go to www.findachurch.co.uk. There are thousands of churches across the UK that would love to welcome you and help you know more and help you know more about God's amazing love. Great. Joe, one thing that people who are worshippers often talk about is intimacy and encounter with God. And you mentioned intimacy there in your prayer. Could you explain a bit about what people are talking about when they talk about intimacy with God, particularly in worship, but just in general life as well? Yeah.
I once heard somebody referring to it as like into me see, in that like I see right into you. So if we're in an intimate relationship here, I'm not just looking at you through a Zoom screen, but I really see into who you are. I know you and you know me. And that's what that intimacy you'd have in your marriage, or that's the intimacy that actually God invites us into, is that he sees us close. We feel his breath, he feels ours. He sees truly who we are, and we get to see truly who he is. So when I think about intimacy, when I think about intimacy in worship, I think actually that is the invitation. It's the interrupting the preoccupation with myself and with my focus on my day, and my focus on my worries, and my focus on my stresses, and it's simply coming and attending to God and being here close to him. That's what I would say when I think of intimacy and intimacy in worship, and that's been the journey and the story of my worship life with God. He regularly challenges, inspires, and pulls things out of me. I once heard from the leader of our church, he just flippantly in a talk once said, "We change through intimacy, not for intimacy." And he was referring to like we change by becoming closer to God, as opposed to I've got to have it all sorted so that God will let me come close to him. And I think that's one of our fears sometimes, is that we know the sin, or that we know the stuff in our lives. We know the ego that we carry, or we know the pride, or we know the dark thoughts we have, and we think, oh, I can't necessarily come and worship God, or I can't bring that to God because that's evil or dark or not what he would want. And actually the whole thing is that's exactly what God wants. God wants us to come to him with the dark stuff, with the secret stuff, with the things that we don't show off to the world, actually, because we change through intimacy when we're face to face with him, as opposed to changing for intimacy.
That's a brilliant answer and really helpful. And I've not heard that into me see thing before. That's quite clever.
That's not me. I can't remember who said it, but that's not me.
Well, I won't forget it though. So that's very good. And with regards to encounter, what sorts of things might people expect when they encounter God? And it sounds like an extraordinary thing that you say is an invitation for us to be intimate and to come into God's presence. What does it look like?
It's a great question. I think the thing with me that is so significant about faith is that this doesn't academically make sense, thankfully, because I'm not, as we established earlier, that's not my strength. It doesn't actually all academically make sense. That there's a talking donkey in the Bible. There's all sorts of things that you look at scripture and go, this actually doesn't logically necessarily makes sense. And I think maybe this fits into some of the popularity of deconstructing, as we kind of go, this doesn't make sense, this doesn't kind of line up. And for me, I think the thing that I try, and I'm often inspired by that simplicity of Jesus inviting people to come like children, is because children don't analyze everything as they're doing it. They just see what's happening and it's there. And I think we can overanalyze, and we can try and understand, and we can expect what things should or shouldn't look like. Whereas actually we're talking about the supernatural, the spiritual, the being beyond what we can see and understand. If this is just an academic exercise, it doesn't make sense. We have to see and expect that there will be some kind of encounter to match with the relationship that we read about in the Bible. And so that encounter, for anybody who's not experienced in especially in the context of worship, can look like God meeting us with moments of peace, moments of joy and elation, moments of stillness, actually in many cases physical healing. The stories of people who come and worship and are physically healed in that moment. It can lead to release of baggage of the past. God is inviting us into a relationship with him. This is not simply an academic exercise. And through relationship, through intimacy, that's then when encounter and those good things happen.
And I think it's probably fair to say, for myself anyway, when I've had encounters with God, I've always come away much better for it. They aren't always easy. Sometimes they can be challenging and difficult even, but actually as you come out through them, you go, actually it's just been great to be in God's presence. So you mentioned there about healings. Is that something that you've seen much of at all in your church? It's
amazing. I wouldn't say that we have a healing ministry as a church, where some places are very clear that that's what they're about, and there's some people who that's their whole ministry. For us, healing seems to happen like on the fringes, and it seems to just happen without hype and without things going on. Actually, it's part of gathering and people worshiping. So I mean, at the moment, we're really praying as a church because there are a number of people who are facing quite serious cancer battles. And so we're praying into that. We have seen cancer healed in the past as a church. We've seen physical, people healed of bad backs and healed of physical things in their bodies, but also we've seen real release of peace for people where they've been battling heavy grief or heavy loss, and God bringing healing into those moments. We've seen lots of that as a church.
Yeah, I've got to say that sounds exciting, and sounds also a bit like the church that we see in the Bible as well, where miracles take place probably much more regularly than as a nation we experience. I think sometimes we can be scared of some of the supernatural stuff, and it makes you go, or maybe that's only stuff that happened in the past and would never happen now. Whereas you're definitely testifying to saying something that you do see, and something that we perhaps should expect more of. So, and I like the way you said it in a very sort of simple way. You said it's stuff that just sort of happens around. It's not something you're making a hype out of. God just seems to get on with touching people. I like that. I think as we seek to get closer to God, we should expect him to also move in ways that perhaps are beyond our normal expectations, but are things that are signs of his kingdom and his love that never fails. So we've talked a bit about your music. We talked a bit about your journey. It'd be interesting to know, what are you doing sort of right now? What are your plans over the next week and next month?
So I've recently taken on a joint role of heading up New Wine Worship with a friend called Pedro, who's based in Leicester. So we are currently working out what that means, what that role looks like for us both, and we're doing that as part of our. We're both employed by churches, so it's a partnership for our churches with New Wine, and we've been recording worship for the United Breaks Out gathering online, which starts on the 29th of July. So we've had teams all over the country. My team in Yeovil, we've had Pedro's team in Leicester, but we've had guys in York and Leeds and in Oxford. So different groups recording together, all ready for that event, and we've got live worship happening as part of that as well. Wow.
Okay. So New Wine obviously normally is in a great big tent, and it's all online totally. For people who didn't get to hear it when we had Paul Harcourt on the show previously, how much does it cost to go to New Wine this year?
It is completely free, all online.
Completely free. I've got to say, I've been to New Wine myself personally before. It is a wonderful opportunity to celebrate and to hear great teaching and to worship and to draw close to God. So if you're listening to this thinking, New Wine, that could be good, I really want to encourage you to go and check it out straight away. Joe, what's the web address for New Wine so people can go and find out about it?
It's new-wine.org.
What's your favourite bit of New Wine?
It is tough because it's such a brilliant thing to gather the church and gather people in person, isn't it? And so, like, my favorite thing really is being in person with good few hundred people or 1,000 people in a venue and celebrating and raising your voices loud and declaring who God is. You can't beat that feeling. I think favorite thing about the online gathering together is that it's free, that you can watch it in your home, that you can be sat in the sofa with a cup of coffee, or there's loads of amazing activities for kids this year. There's huge load of resources and a clever app and things that people can access from there. So I think there's good merits in being able to enjoy it at home, and lots of people in their local churches are watching it together and trying to have that same community camp feel, I guess, as part of doing it online. But I can't wait for the moment where we can all be back in a large tent together singing at the top of our voices.
Well, let's hope that's for 2022. But well done for your part in helping make New Wine come together and work online for this year, because I can imagine it's been a process that maybe has some disappointment in it and some challenges, but I'm really looking forward to seeing what God will do with all that you've put together. So thank you for that. And what about with your music going forwards, beyond New Wine, where are you headed?
Yeah, so I've been, as I've said, I've been writing lots. I'm currently sitting on an album's worth of material that I'm I'm working in the process of producing. Realistically, I think that will be out in 2022 now, because this year I've been focused on our local church, and we've got songwriters, some amazing songwriters within the church who have been, we've been working and shaping songs together through lockdown, so remotely. So we're releasing an EP in October as a church that I'm really excited about, and backing those songs.
And what about your personal goals? Obviously, there's the music side of things, but what do you think Jesus wants to do in you and in your family in the next 12 months?
My constant hope and desire is that I would be a good dad to my two boys, and a good husband to my wife. And we both work for the local church. She's an incredible youth worker, leads like 100 young people across different groups every week, and is one of the most amazing people. But we can both be quite focused on all that we're involved with all the time, and lots of different projects. And so I think my biggest hope and desire always is that first and foremost, I'd be the best dad in the world and the best husband in the world. That's quite a high standard to set for myself. So I think if I can miss on the best in the world and still do pretty well, then I think I'm doing okay there.
So I would agree, being a dad and a husband, both very high callings. So well done for having that on your heart to invest in. And with regards to the Bible, so you mentioned some Bible verses earlier. Who's your favourite Bible character and why? You are not allowed to choose God.
Favourite Bible character? I mean, the jokester within me says Samson, because I just think he's epic, that he killed 10,000 men with the jawbone of a donkey. I think that's pretty impressive when you actually think about what that really was.
That is quite impressive. It's not the nicest of tales, but it's quite impressive.
Yeah, that's not the role model we're all looking for, is it? I think the stories that the things I always come back to would be, I love Daniel's faithfulness in following God, and he wasn't afraid to back down, wasn't afraid to be the person that God had made him to be, didn't shift and change even when the world wanted him to. So I always come back to Daniel. He's deeply inspiring.
Yeah, absolutely is. And also a person who had dreams, so prophetic dreams, which I think is quite an interesting thing. So if there was one bit of Daniel you'd more like to be like yourself, what bit of Daniel then would it be that you say definitely is this?
I was about to say become a vegan, but actually I don't think that's the thing that... I think it is the clarity in knowing this is who God's made me to be for this point. And actually, I'm not wavering. I'm not going to shift and change, no matter how much the world pressures, no matter how much circumstance and everything else would want me to be something different. Actually, this is who God's made me to be, and I'm standing firm in that. So that would say throw me in a lion's den, but whether I'm ready for that today, I don't know.
So, but standing firm on your identity of who you are in God and also his purposes, what he's called you for at this time, that sounds to me like a good thing to be wanting to be able to continue in. That's great. Now we got time to play one more single from you, and it's a single that I know that you wrote last year called Waiting. Could you tell us about that?
Yes, so we've had a weird year, haven't we?
That is an understatement, sir.
We went into the start of the pandemic going through the sudden reality of what that actually was going to mean for us. So we'd had our second baby called Freddie. He came 5 weeks early, so it was a bit of a surprise, in January last year. And so going just as everything was kicking off, he was just 7 weeks old. We spent a few weeks in and out of hospital, and we were at this point we were still just landing, really. We were very dependent on my wife's parents who live close, and suddenly the reality of the pandemic's hitting, and we realized that my mother-in-law was going to be in the shielding category and that we had to be really careful, and it wasn't just a case of suddenly being careful. Actually, it was like, oh right, we're not actually going to be able to see you, and so there was this kind of huge gut-wrenching, heartbreaking moment for us as a family, like everybody was facing, but just suddenly this, I feel like we're saying goodbye, and we don't even know how long we're saying goodbye for. And we could be traveling across the world, but we're going 5 minutes down the road, and yet we can't see you, because if we do, we're putting you at risk of,
of course.
Yeah, so there was just this, it was a huge amount of emotion and things we were feeling. And often I think some of the best expressions of creativity that I've ever had have been at those points of strongest emotion. And came back and we were just trying, we were actually going, how on earth are we going to do this with a newborn and a toddler? And so this song Waiting came out, and it was a heart cry and a lament of how long is this going to be? And at that point, we really had no idea how long it was going to be. And it just started as my own little song that I was just singing for my sake. And then it became a song that I felt like I needed to help other people articulate. And that seems to be the stories that I've come back from it, is that it's helped people articulate some of their own feelings. And then, it's been not just a weird year, it's been a tough year for anyone in a similar sort of job to me. We've been learning how to live stream and learning how to produce TV broadcasts for church, which has been a totally different world. And then for us as a local church, one of our most amazing, wonderful volunteers, a guy called Chris, who was part of our food bank volunteer team, was the life and soul of the party, the center of our church community, in the building every day. He bought our son his first football kit as a United strip to mess with both grandparents, to mess with, a dear friend and someone as a whole church we dearly loved. And sadly, he passed away from COVID. And so that like heartbreak of not just the waiting, what could this be, but also the waiting now, we can't even process this necessarily together. Yeah, it's been a bit of a lament story. It's been a bit of a journey on that. So that's what this song is.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, and for sharing through your heart throughout this time together for the Artist Interview here on Hope FM. So Joe Hardy, this is your track, Waiting. God bless you, Joe. Bye-bye.
Bye, thanks so much for having me.
'Cause the end will come one day, but now I'm waiting for this whole thing to blow over. I'm waiting, and I feel so far away. I know this won't be forever. My heart just doesn't understand today.
And that was Waiting by Joe Hardy. And thank you so much to Joe for joining us for the Artist Interview, a podcast by Hope FM. There are many more artists and interviews for you to enjoy. Please do look us up on whichever podcast platform you're using right now. Subscribe, like, share it with a friend. We hope that you'll be blessed by it, and we appreciate you taking time to listen. God bless you.
Talking to some of the best names in contemporary Christian music. This is the Hope FM Artist Interview.